or featured the pioneering surf documentary film Step Into Liquid, and they were the inspiration for the character Chicken Joe on the animated film Surf's Up. It's my pleasure to introduce both Lee and Larry, and I'm just delighted to have them here. Having had a chance at least to meet Larry some, it's like, this is going to be an entertaining and informative evening. And I'm sure with all the things he said about Lee, I'm sure that you're welcome here too.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Let's give it a big hand. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll start it out. We're very honored to be here. This is fun. Always giving back to the community is important to Lee and I, and that was part of the reason we did the Dairyland Surf Classic for 25 years. Excuse me, and still promote the free and easy lifestyle of surfing at the #1 hotspot for freshwater surfing in the world, Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So I'll start it out by telling you a little bit about, first of all, the Great Lakes. No, it's rare that anybody has any idea. We're lucky being here in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, that we are on the western shore of 1/5 of the world's fresh water. Think about that. The Great Lakes encompasses 1/5 of the world's fresh water, those 5 Great Lakes. Its coastline is 11,000 miles, which makes up more coastline than the east and west coast of the U.S. combined. It's 8 states of the United States, 1 province of Canada. It's America's greatest coastline. And in years to come, it's not going to be money, oil, diamonds that's going to make you rich. It's going to be fresh water. And we're lucky enough to live where we live here on these Great Lakes. It brings us warmth during the winter, cool during the summer, entertainment and fresh water all year around. The second biggest of the Great Lakes is right at our doorway, Lake Michigan. It's 310 miles long and 110 miles across. It's 22,440 square miles of open water. It's not a lake, it's an inland ocean. We've never had a reported shark attack. Reported. But surfers do lie. I tell stories. And growing up here was amazing. To live on this body of water gave us our life's greatest inspiration, our passion, and the biggest education anyone can ever get. When you have a passion like we do, or like some of you have, you find out not just how to surf, but how to build surfboards, where surfboards come, the history of surfing, who are the big names in surfing in the past and currently, and it just keeps dovetailing. I mean, why should I know that water weighs 8.34 pounds per gallon?
Until you get hit with it.
Until you get hit by one. And so what happens is this education just wasn't paddling out on a surfboard as a young kid. It became the family of surfers, not just in the Sheboygan area, not just in Wisconsin or the Great Lakes, but nationally and internationally. And we learned that we all speak the same language. And having a passion like that, it dovetails into where you take your vacations, the vehicles you drive, the bad shirts you have to wear.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that shirt.
And the way you decorate your house, the way you raise your children. Heck, we even have our own music. Golf doesn't have. There's no golf music, no fishing music, no hunting music. And so it's just becoming, my twin brother Lee in 2 more weeks turns 62. And for all these years that we've been doing this, it's meant so much to us that it's our lifestyle. It's not just a sport. And when you paddle out here and you start talking to people in the water in what's called the lineup, where you line up just outside the breakers, and you find out, you know, they're from Illinois and Minnesota. They're from Indiana and Michigan. You'll have a guy paddle out from Boston or another one from California, and you'll hear the guy with a funny accent from Australia. You know, for some reason they're here because of their families or work or travel. And especially if they travel, they'll take a couple of extra days and they'll make their way up here to see what it, you know, if it really does exist. Is freshwater surfing something that really happens? And you'll look at them and go, you're a large, right? What do you mean? Your wetsuit, large? Yeah. Reach in the back of the pickup truck, hand them a wetsuit. Longboard or shortboard? Always longboard. Well, there's 3 longboards. Those are mine. Why don't you paddle out? And they'll go, are you kidding me? Well, it's bragging rights. It's freshwater surfing, man. You go back home and tell everybody you surf Sheboygan, Wisconsin. It's internationally known hotspot for freshwater surfing. And they won't believe it. They just don't, nobody does this. Because so many of these spots around the world are territorial and locals only. Oh, and the best locals are the Hawaiians. You know, we're Howleys and the Hui. You know, the big old Hawaiian boys tell you, who you? What you doing here? Why you paddle out here? You get out of my waves. You know, you go home, brah. You know, you don't belong here. But here, it may be this naive Midwestern attitude, this openness. The Hawaiians gave us a word called aloha, which means so many things: hello, goodbye, peace, and love. So it's this aloha spirit that we share here when people come in to say, no, come on, paddle out, brother. You know, you're one of us. Come on. And even the big old Hawaiians get a kick out of that. And there's another word the Hawaiians gave us, and surfers use Hawaiian words all the time. It's called ohana, and it means extended family. And when you're a surfer, you have a huge family. And you tell them, come on out. And then they'll ask, okay, I paddle out. Who do I look out for? What do you mean? Well, do I stay away from those guys? Stay away, who's going to yell at me? Who's going to try to beat me up? Who's going to slash my tires? Oh, no. This is Great Lakes, brother. You don't have that. You know, you paddle out, you tell them where you're from, they'll give you waves. Hey, take that wave, go ahead, take it. I said, there's only one problem. He says, I knew there was. What is it? Oh, when you come in, you got to drink beers with us and tell us your stories. So when you go back home and you tell your surf club, your friends, what it's like to surf the Great Lakes, we hear it again and again and again and again and again. Best place on the planet to surf. Sometimes it's not the biggest waves, sometimes it's not the best waves. But in an award-winning film that we're in, a young lady came up with, the best surfer is the one having the most amount of fun. And that's what it's all about. And I've told you a little bit about what the Great Lakes was all about, how it was created by these glaciers that were 3 to 5 miles thick as they, came down from Canada.
You remember those, don't you?
I remember that. You're older than me.
16 minutes.
But he looks 16 minutes older.
I remember him when he was this big. We were roommates at one time.
We were. Normally we don't tell people who's older, but when they hear him refer to me as afterbirth, they kind of forget. When you walk out on this Niagara escarpment called North Point, this limestone outcropping, you can actually still see the grooves in that limestone, which indicate the path that those 3 to 5 mile thick glaciers produce that are still out there today. And when I do talks and lectures and interviews, I like to take them out there and say, right here, these are the signs and the symbols that were given to us by Mother Nature that reminds us of not only how gentle it can be, but how furious, how it can give and how it can also take. So Lee will now tell you how we first began and the beginnings of surfing here
I don't remember.
in Sheboygan.
In the mid-60s, we started out skimboarding, which a skimboard is like a piece of marine plywood about this long, about that wide. You run down the beach, drop it, and jump on it. And Lakeshore, do I have to? I'm under the witness protection program.
It's witless.
Oh, how does this? Anyway, I'll give you so mid-60s, and there are some older guys that started a club called Lakeshore Surf Club. And they were 2 or 3 years older than we were, and we kind of looked up to them, and they had surfboards and stuff like that. And little by little, with paper route money or whatever we could do, we managed to scrape up enough money to buy a surfboard. Back then, they were $100, $150. But in the mid-60s, that was a pretty good chunk of change for somebody 14, 15. And your parents are going, we're not going to, what do you want a surfboard for? Well, lo and behold, living 3 blocks from the beach, it was perfect. Other kids are going to the playground during the summer, playing baseball, whatever, zell balls, stuff like that. We spent our whole summers and winters at the beach. It was just our getaway. And little by little, we actually learned how to surf. I mean, no one taught us. We didn't have movies to watch. I mean, Endless Summer was probably the first movie of surfing we ever saw. So lo and behold, and these older guys, some went to Vietnam, some went to college, some got married. And Lakeshore Surf Club disappeared. And there were like 8 out of 25 that kept on surfing. And Larry and I and another half dozen guys kept on surfing. And we got good at it. Well, I did. I don't know about him.
It's taken me 47 years.
So it was so cool because if you would see somebody with a surfboard and you didn't recognize their car, you go, I got to follow this guy. I got to find out. And maybe it was someone from Illinois, maybe somebody from Minnesota. But little by little, we decided to start a surf competition. So we could invite people to Sheboygan to enjoy what we were loving. And the first year we had maybe 10 people, the next year maybe 15, the next year maybe 20. And I mean, we didn't have the internet. I mean, the internet, you can invite 1,500 people in a heartbeat. So we're sending out mailers and keeping addresses and actually making long distance phone calls, which would cost you like $1. And little by little, we drew in these people from around the Great Lakes. Some were transplants from, California, Florida, the Gulf Coast, wherever. And some just said, I've been surfing down in Illinois for 10 years and didn't realize anybody else surfed. Well, here we are. So they came. And obviously, once the internet and things like that evolved, then we could connect to everyone. And Sheboygan was the place to go. The hospitality, the breaks we had, etc. The surfboards evolved. The wetsuits, our old wetsuits were dive suits. And none of them ever fit right. And if you could spend an hour in 40-degree water, you were lucky. Now with the wetsuits, you can be out in ice for 3 hours and hopefully still walk to your car.
It'll be 33-degree water, 17-degree air with a 24 below wind chill factor. You'll jump off of 10 foot of icebergs to paddle across 6-foot perfect glassy waves that would make any ocean surfer go slackjaw. And 33-degree water temperature with 10-foot icebergs really thins out the crowd. You get almost every wave.
There's like no one at the beach.
Yeah. You're not tripping over blankets.
Yeah. So, yeah, we were fortunate to grow up, and Sheboygan itself evolved with us. Because anybody who grew up in Sheboygan in the 60s, you look at Northside Beach, Southside Beach, the riverfront, the harbor area, it looked pretty ratty. And through a lot of involvement with city leaders, mayors that probably lost their job for building a marina or whatever, You know, people would say, you're spending too much money down there. Well, it's our jewel. The lakefront, the riverfront, the marina is Sheboygan's biggest asset. And it was just cool to see the coal piles go away, you know, the lakefronts get cleaned up, great facilities, handicap accessible, a fantastic marina. And we were fortunate to grow through this and see it all happen.
I was fortunate to do a lot of volunteer work with Sheboygan County Board of Tourism and Wisconsin Board of Tourism, and I was featured speaker at many of their breakfasts, along with sitting at the table with the governor and some other luminaries. And when I talked to them, one of the things that I said about this jewel of Wisconsin, Sheboygan, is that when you move to an area, whether it's your factory or your home, you put a pin in the middle of that area, draw a 35-mile circle around that area to see what's available. Well, here in Sheboygan, that 35 miles is cut in half. And I looked at these people that make a difference in our city and our state and say, let's make that an asset. And when I put that out, we started looking at safer beaches, cleaner beaches, exercise areas, and we just continued on with Blue Harbor and docks, fire rings. Much of that Lee and I have had a hand in some way or another in promoting this healthy lifestyle. Now what we're pushing is to let everyone know, and many people don't know that those beaches are there all year round. They're just as pretty or prettier in the winter. The reason the Dairyland Surf Classic was started Labor Day weekend is it's a celebration. We're celebrating summer's finally over. And this is the beginning of our surf season. So it's September, October, November, December, January, February, and March. And people from California look at you and go, what? Because their surf season's during the summer. You can't catch a wave by yourself. We've surfed Malibu and Huntington and Doheny and Sano and all the big name places where you better know somebody when you're paddling out, you'll get beat up, or there's only you and 250 of your friends out surfing. But here in Sheboygan, this rich culture, when these young kids start surfing on the Great Lakes, they're so excited reading all the magazines, but then they see the 7 movies that Lee and I were in, the big one being Step into Liquid, which is still on Showtime and Cinemax. The people that made the standard for all surf films, Endless Summer, came here and for 5 days followed us around during the Dairyland Surf Classic and caught some footage here, which really put us on the map. But Unsalted is another big one, where when they filmed Unsalted here, they came here 2 different times. They brought in pro surfers from Santa Cruz, California, and the buoy off of Sheboygan was going off at 15 feet. So if you think this is an 8-foot ceiling, twice this high were what the waves were, and there were 65 surfers in 3 locations surfing, and these pros went out of all places at North Point. And if anybody knows North Point, when it gets to be that size, I don't even like sitting in my car in the parking lot. And these pro surfers were saying, we were pulling out of waves because they were too big, they were pitching, we got barreled, you know, and you hear these guys talking, and in this movie, one of the funniest parts, we always laugh, the guy's pulling his board out of the back of his car after, you know, being on a flight all night. He gets here and he's shivering and he goes, Sheboygan? Is that even a real name? I can't believe I'm here in Malibu, the Midwest. And so it just brings a popularity of the uniqueness of this name, Sheboygan, the uniqueness of this state. You're surfing Wisconsin. You don't see a lot of those t-shirts. And it's freshwater surfing. So, you know, growing up, my dad during the war was submarine rescue, so he'd put on the brass bell helmet, the canvas suit, the lead boots, and go down and weld up submarines. Later on, for 2 years, he ran a tug out of Detroit, and then he became first mate on some of the biggest ore carriers on the Great Lakes. So there's a lot of water, Great Lakes water in our blood. So growing up like that, Dad understood what it was all about. I mean, if we got in trouble, it's only because we went inland. you know? And then Mom would threaten us with these stupid threats. Oh, sure, if all your friends jumped off the end of the pier, I bet you would too.
Oh, yeah.
Dad would nudge Mom and go, they're surfers. Oh yeah, that's right. You know, Mom didn't swim a stroke. So it was always interesting. And then giving back to our community. When we did the Dairyland Surf Classic, there were 2 people that ran that entire event. There is only one other bigger event at the lakefront, and it's called 4th of July. And cars were lined up on both sides of the road from North Point to the Coast Guard station. And the last 7 years when we were sponsored by Corona, we would do a maximum. We tell them we can only do a maximum of 7 interviews a day. So whether it was Good Morning America Today program, MSNBC Nightly News, one of the last ones was Reuters News Service, NPR, and it really put Sheboygan on the map.
Yeah, you know, it's odd because we started surfing to have fun. And, you know, to get noticed like this is like, really? I mean, I get a phone call from the Boston Globe. Would you do an interview? And it turned out Larry's wife is from Boston, and he was out in the Hamptons on vacation with her family. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you my brother's phone number. I think he would get a kick out of, and sure enough, the Boston Globe called him out there. But we've been featured in the Honolulu Union, Denver, whatever.
Our story went to Associated Press, and when it went to Associated Press, we're working through Teamworks Media, one of the biggest media consortiums in the nation, working through Corona and Pacifico, our sponsor, and they have trackers and readers that read, you know, every time it shows up in print any place, or radio or TV or any of the media, they report this in a report back to Corona to show, you know, what their PR work is doing for the Dairyland Surf Classic in Corona. So when I went to Associated Press, I got a report that said, we touched a potential customer base of 4.6 million people and did free advertising for Corona to the tune of $138,000. Corona really liked us.
Well, the Chicago Tribune had called me and knew about the event coming up and stuff like that. And this reporter said, can I come up to Sheboygan and interview you? I said, yeah, meet me on the lakefront at Northside Beach. There's an overlook. And she pulled up with another person and came walking out on the overlook at Northside Beach. And she goes, oh my God. I said, what? She said, well, I've always driven up to Door County and always thought it was so beautiful, but I never realized Sheboygan had this. And Greek Fest was going on in the park, and the beach was, and the water looked Caribbean blue. And I said, you know, we've got a world-class art center, world-class fishing, world-class golf, world-class auto racing, and we've got a gorgeous town. I said, check the restaurants, etc. And we talked for maybe an hour. And she wrote all this stuff down and hit the riverfront and hit Stefano's and went to the art center and stuff like that. And like 2 weeks later, there was a full-page article in the Sunday Chicago Tribune, and the Board of Tourism called me and said, do you know what this is worth? We can't afford a full page in the Chicago Tribune. And I said, well, I don't know. I was just talking. I love our town.
When it went to Associated Press, it was 1/3 page standard article that hit all the newspapers. And when I say all the newspapers, it was New York Times, Boston Globe, Miami Herald, San Diego Union, the front page of the Honolulu Star newspaper was sent to me by one of the world's biggest surfboard collectors. And to be able to touch this world of surfing, and the surfers that come here, because we're centrally located on Lake Michigan, and we're in the prevailing westerlies. Unless we get a low pressure to come through, a storm, or heavy cloudiness, that low pressure produces winds off the lake or onshore, and because we're centrally located, north or northeast winds or south or southeast winds will produce waves for us. Conversely, let's say you're in Chicago, only north winds will create those waves. And because we get waves almost out of any wind that comes off the lake, everybody came here. So from Black River to just around the bend north of North Point, which we call the Cove or the Zoo, for some of you old timers that remember the Zoo, there are 22 different breaks, or 22 different ways that wave breaks just a little differently. And there are people that just come here and stand on many of our overlooks, surfers that have surfed all around the world, and I've had people say, do you have any idea what you have here? And I'll go, yeah, we do. And we don't take it for granted. We're always cleaning our beaches or warning others to pay homage to what we have here, the water, be courteous on our beaches and waterways, and and to take care. So, you know, living here is such a privilege. Now, what's it like to catch a wave? You paddle several blocks out. You can paddle nearly a half a mile out. And you get out there, and we had one guy say, right now if you put my hair on fire, I couldn't put my hands up over my head to put it out. You get out there and you can't believe you've just paddled for, you know, possibly 20 minutes to get out there to ride those waves that are higher than this room. And you finally made it out there. So what's the stupidest thing you can do? Spin that board around, paddle as fast as you can to catch a wave, to surf all the way back in the shore, to do it all over again. Now do it for 6 or 8 hours. Well, when you're a well-muscled kid, you can do it. And it'd probably kill me today, but...
yeah, it probably would.
But we are 10% less buoyant here in freshwater than we would be in saltwater, which, you know, for people who custom design every square inch of their surfboards, that's a big deal. You come from California, you get here, you better order yourself a better board. And the surfers that come here can't believe these 22 breaks, piers, river mouths, sandbars. We even have a reef. You know, we have rocky outcroppings and the best surfing, freshwater surfing in the world. So they created an acronym called COTU. They call this place COTU, and it's C-O-T-U, and it stands for Center of the Universe. And for freshwater surfers, they are right on serious about, we're going to COTU. So many of these kids, when they're growing up with surfing on the Great Lakes, their dreams aren't Malibu, Cocoa Beach, you know, Waimea Bay, Bonsai Pipeline, the big legendary breaks. As soon as I get my driver's license and my parents tell me I can take a road trip, I'm going to COTU. You know, they're coming to what the tourists call the Malibu of the Midwest. And one of the runner-ups for city manager of Malibu is a surfer and was in Sheboygan. And he was the one, Dave Cole, that came up with that phrase. He says, this is Malibu of the Midwest. It's just like Malibu. And so we're very fortunate in being able to grow up here and share the history and what we have with anybody willing to listen. It's our passion.
You know, people have asked, what's it like to surf? And, you know, God, I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And I came up with, you know, the first time you were upright on a two-wheel bicycle, you don't know how you're doing it. There's 100 things going through your head all at once, but all of a sudden you're pedaling and you have that bike upright. That's what it's like when you catch your first wave. You don't know how you're doing it. I mean, yeah, you've been working at it for months maybe, and as kids, you know, when older people, and I don't mean this in a bad way, when older people try to learn how to surf, they don't have the patience. But as a kid, you're willing to, at 13 years old, spend hours and hours and hours paddling, falling down, standing up, paddling, fall. It's like learning how to play tennis when you're 13 versus learning how to play tennis when you're 40. And that's how we learned, and some have the passion and some kept it up. and some surfed for 2 or 3 years and said, it's not for me.
But can you imagine growing up in the 60s, looking for your identity?
Gidget.
Now there was so much going, what did you call it?
Gidget.
There was so much going on with the Vietnam War, with art, with music. It was constantly changing. It was a revolution. Not just people against the government, but the art world, and everything was changing so quickly. And you're a young person growing up looking for your identity, and you lock into surfing. Now, who was big? Jan and Dean and the Beach Boys, you heard that?
The Ventures.
Yep, the Ventures. And you're listening to this great music, seeing on TV these little clips of surfers, what they're wearing. So we wanted to emulate California and Hawaii, the way they talk, the way they walk. And I remember the first time.
It was tough with sandals during the winter. It was.
You move faster. You know, up north they call them snowshoes. And I remember the first time I actually admitted that I'm a surfer. I surf. Now, Andy Summersberger was the president of Lakeshore Surf Club and had a van with the back end jacked up and these bubble letters flowing across the sides that said Lakeshore Surf Club. He was an icon. He was a god. I mean, he had this strut, handmade sandals, old Mexican serape, and he was just so far off the charts, you didn't even, you know, whisper his name. He was that big. And I remember walking past Optenberg Ironworks, seeing the van coming, going, oh, here comes Andy Summersberger. And he looked at me and he waved at me. I remember where I was, where I was walking, where I was. Andy Summersberger recognized me. And it was from that day on that we realized, hey, we're becoming a part of this subculture. And these guys are so far off the charts that they had a garage between 8th and 9th Street, a 4-car garage, just off of Clara Avenue. You'd hear the music pumping. You weren't allowed to go down there. So you'd stand on the sidewalk half a block away and sneak peeks of who was coming and going and listen to the music and try to emulate what they were and who they were. But we lived on the beach. We ate on the beach. We slept on the beach. We cleaned the beach. And it was just a cool way of growing up. Now, the surfboards didn't have ankle leashes. At the tail of the surfboards now, you have an ankle leash, so if you have a 10-foot board, you have a 10-foot long piece of rubber tubing that's Velcroed to your ankle, and if you lose your board, if you fall off your board and you wipe out, you just pull on that and it comes back. Back in the 60s, we didn't have that. Almost 90% of the time, you wiped out, your board went all the way in without you, and in this ill-fitting scuba suit, you just keep on swimming. So most of the time, you did more swimming than surfing. And of course, they didn't have the fancy surfboard waxes. Now the surfboard waxes come in different temperatures, so you can't take a Great Lakes winter wax and go to the tropics because it turns to grease. The water's too warm. Back then, all anybody had was paraffin wax for canning. And you'd break up these bars into a 5-pound coffee can, take your vice grips, start a little spout, put it on the stove, make sure it didn't start on fire, and then you'd run out to your surfboard and you'd hold it up here so it would splash and create more of a texture. And then 2 days later, your parents would be yelling because you had an outline where you killed the grass, and you're going, but isn't it cool? It looks like a surfboard. You'd get down to the beach and you'd rub as much lake sand into it to create more traction as possible. And then when you were knee paddling out in that big surf that was created by a storm that churned all the sediment off the bottom, your knees would get infected, the tops of your feet from the wounds from that rough surface, and all the knuckles on your toes. So you develop what surfers in California and Hawaii all over call surfers knots. And they destroy your wetsuit. And now these boards that we're buying anywhere from $17 to $75 used are now worth $2,000 to $4,000. And so You know, it's fun to be able to be this old and I get calls from throughout the Great Lakes or sometimes throughout the United States to evaluate or purchase some of these boards. So we're always buying, selling, swapping, trading unique and collectible boards. Then we get the strangest calls. And doing the Dairyland Surf Classic, Lee and I would have meetings weekly coming up to it, and the final month we would have daily meetings, and Lee calls early on and says, guess what, Wisconsin Board of Tourism called. They put out a magazine of all the events. They heard about the Dairyland Surf Classic, want to put it in their yearly events magazine, and asked me about it, and they're going to write it all up. I said, what, it's great. It's going to be great for the Dairyland Surf Classic. He says, but I got to tell you, they asked for a contact number, and I gave them yours. I went, what? I'm getting calls. Some old lady, will you send me a brochure? Brochure surfers, you know. So the following year, Wisconsin Board of Tourism calls me from the magazine and says, we'd like to enter that again. You're still doing it? Yeah, we're still doing it. Has anything changed? No, nothing is. Yeah, the contact number. I gave this. So every year it was a running joke that we would go back and forth and back and forth. So we'd always get these unique, we got to do this interview, that interview. And got a call from these guys. Hi, we're, the executives for North America for Corona and Pacifico. If you can get the front page of the Chicago Tribune, the Sunday edition, 4 years in a row with your event, we want to sponsor your event. Like, what? Wow. We were always scrambling for sponsors, anybody that would help out. And so that was cool. I said, so, okay, well, how do we do this? Well, we'd like to invite you to Chicago. You tell us the suite you want to stay in. You pick the suite. We'll pick you up with a stretch limo. You pick the restaurant. We'll go to any restaurant. We'll pay for it all. And we'd like to talk to you about sponsoring the Dairyland Surf Classic. It's okay. So I call Lee. Lee's son lives in Chicago. He's a top-notch chef in Chicago and gets to Chicago a lot. I've been to Chicago a lot. So I tell him about it. I said, what do you think? He goes, well, he said, do you really want to go to Chicago? I said, not really. He said, call him back, have him come here. It's okay, so we met at a burger joint downtown. They bought. We had Coronas. And it's kind of neat when you can do that. And what it is, it's all about staying these little Sheboygan guys, We know the big world's been out there. We've searched it out a lot. We've been all the hot spots surfing, and it's funny, we're more recognized on the beaches of California than we are in our own hometown for surfing. Right now they've got 17 billboards in 4 states through Wisconsin Board of Tourism and Sheboygan County Board of Tourism with surfing on them, and it's my photographs. But we get these calls all the time, and then we finally got one that said, I'd like to make a documentary movie about you two. And we went, what? And so he was going to meet us, and I looked up his name thinking, I'm going to blow this one off. It just sounds like a lot of work, and it's not going to, it's not going to be that good. And I found out he was a top producer and director and writer who's been nominated for an Emmy and won a Peabody Award for Rwanda Will the Scars Ever Heal. And he'd just gotten done writing the history of the Milwaukee Braves. And I went, wow, this might be worth doing. So we met at Highland House. I brought the laptop along. Lee brought a video of 1967-68, a black and white that he had made as a kid. And we popped that in as we talked, and he looked, because he's an archivist, and said, this film, do you guys have any idea what you were doing here and what you were documenting? I said, no, not really. And he says, it's priceless. And he said, you know what's better than a movie? A book. And part of it, I think, he took a look at our faces and figured a documentary wouldn't work, and said, we're doing a book. So we said, and we thought it'd be a bunch of interviews. And
yeah, it's unreal when somebody says they want to write a book about you, because I don't know, we're just average guys. to us anyway. And we still blew that off thinking it's not going to happen. Well, 2 weeks later, he calls and says, I've got a publisher, and I'm going to do a contract and send it to you. And it's like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So anyway, yeah, we got a contract.
So he slides us this big contract that we can't have another book written about us for 7 years. Well,
Like, how many people are going to...
darn. So we go through this whole big thing, and of course, we take it and send it off to our lawyers and look at,
What lawyers?
sign it. So he slid us another contract for all movie rights and wanted to own our image into perpetuity, including Lee's 67 movie, and in caricature, in silhouette, and all of this into eternity.
Even into nudity.
There's nudity?
No, there isn't.
And
I said no. I said you can't have my film work.
no.
Nope.
But he did say, when he slid the contract back, I was there when the ass said it. He said the only way he would allow a movie to be made about him and his brother Larry is if Brad Pitt played him and Don Knotts played me. I'm like, not only is he a bad actor, but isn't he dead? You're going to have a dead guy?
They'll bring him back.
They'll bring him back.
So yeah, it took 2 years to do, because Bill Pavletic, who wrote the book, lives in L.A., so it's a lot of correspondence on the internet, etc., and getting facts and dates and photos and etc., etc., etc. It was interesting. It was really interesting to do.
It's amazing how they write books now. And going through the process with Bill, nearly 2.5 years, he carried a thing that looked like a Bic lighter. It would hold 17 hours of audio. And we'd sit and we'd talk. I'd drive him up the coast, we'd talk about different things, pull off, walk off on a beach, on a pier, and each square foot of Sheboygan's beach has a different story. He would take that, he'd plug it into his computer, download all the audio, and he says, thank God for struggling actors and actresses in Hollywood. I says, why? He says, they're called transcribers. We send this audio off to them, and they bring it up in the written word, but also they look over at the digits, and every so often a digit will appear on there. So if I want to listen to the emotion in your voice as I'm reading that, I could go back to my little audio recorder and listen to the emotion in your voice as you said it. I'm thinking, would Hemingway still be such a great writer if he did it that way? And it was, so we talked about some ideas on what the name of the book would be, and he insisted on Some Like It Cold. And I looked at him and I said, you're going to write an entire book about my ex-wife? My ex-wife wasn't happy about that comment, by the way. So if you're interested, it is currently out of print because it's
sold out.
Yeah.
Well, it's odd because I looked on Amazon, and it was like 2 weeks before the book was supposed to be published out in print, and I could buy it in London, but I couldn't buy it here yet. And I'm thinking, London, why would somebody in London want his book? But lo and behold, yeah, it's worldwide, and just like doing the movie with Dana Brown. It was so odd to have a film crew with a sound man and a director and a producer, and you're going like, God, and I'm out in Malibu. I'm surfing with some guys and just yakking, and one of the guys goes, you're in that movie. I said, yeah, I am. And he said, are you going to be here for a while? I said, I'm going to surf for a couple hours. I got a cold. I don't feel good, so I'm going to be hitting the road. Before you leave, we got to go down to the beach, and I got to have my picture taken with you. Well, okay, fine. I mean, do we get a free beer out of it? Anything? But so it's odd being noticed when, like I said before, we just did this for fun. We didn't do it to really stand out.
But last year he purchased a book back from Keene Publications, bought all the rights back, and the same day he sold it to one of Wisconsin's biggest publishers, Wisconsin Historical Press, which is also part of Wisconsin Historical Museum. And they insisted on a 4th chapter to see why we stopped doing the Dairyland Surf Classic. And so it's a, I don't want to say it's a final chapter because it's a biography. And
I know how it ends.
well, Lee and I have never read the book.
No.
So we tell people, if you read it, we die in the end, could you please let us know, because I'm not really feeling good right now. But the book is pretty interesting. It tells the highs and the lows of our lives, some accolades and some adventures, some awards. I had received the 2nd highest life-saving award in the United States in 1991 for rescuing 2 11-year-old boys off of North Pier. I also received a nomination for the Carnegie Hero Fund Award. I nearly lost my life in that rescue. And we've done rescues in the past. And when you're surfers, or when you live your life on the water, you know, the Hawaiians call Caucasians or even tourists howlies. Well, we get howlies here. We get people that don't know how to behave on the beach and waterways and piers and do a lot of stupid things.
Yeah, Lake Michigan can be very unforgiving, and we've learned that, but the main thing is never panic, stay calm, stay relaxed. Sometimes it's difficult because you're getting hit by 6, 7 foot waves and you're tumbling.
Every 9 seconds.
Yeah, but as a surfer, we've never had a drowning on the Great Lakes of a surfer, which is amazing because we are out in some of the nastiest water you ever want to be in. But people that are used to swimming in Elkhart Lake or Crystal Lake or an inland lake don't realize what we used to call undertow, which is now called rip current, can just suck you down the beach. It can, you lose your footing, and before you know it, you're being sucked out. And you're being hit by waves, and you might even be a little hypothermic.
Two years ago, I'll say 3 years in a row, there were more drownings just on Lake Michigan due to rip currents than the entire state of California, which is huge because we've only got, 4, maybe 5 months of water activity here. Yes?
We have a cottage in Sturgeon Bay right by the South Pier. And it's all, we walk right out of the cottage, right down the water. It's all sand, there's no stones. But we have a rule. You walk out and swim in. Do not swim out.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, holy cats.
Well, like it was 7 years ago here in Sheboygan, 7, 8 years ago, when that Hmong young man drowned, and he was right next to North Pier. And next to the piers, you get a trough. We know it because we're surfers, but it's deeper right there. And all those waves coming in have to go back out. And that's what creates undertow or rip current. And he stepped into the deep part, apparently panicked, and drowned. And a few months later, the city called us and wanted us on a panel with the Coast Guard, police department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I couldn't due to my working hours, but Larry was on the panel to come up with ideas to, the average age is what?
14.
Average age is 14 for drowning, because they are experimenting. And maybe some of them have had some swimming, but our middle schools don't have swimming pools. So a lot of kids don't really learn how to swim until they go into high school. So a lot of great ideas. And the city spent $70,000 on call boxes and life rings, and the call boxes are solar powered, and talked to Larry to say, where do you think these kids are going to go out?
And it was amazing talking to the Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard's deep water. And most of the time, Coast Guard's recovery, along with the Sheriff's Department. They're not surfers in the lineup where it's breaking or where it's the heaviest water is. So, I argued and educated a lot of these people that, had spent much of their life concerned with rescues, that this isn't. So we basically have two kind of rip currents, a straight line and a structural. So if the current is going sideways to the beach and hits a pier or jetty or even a post, it's like putting your thumb over the end of a garden hose. It just amplifies it. Now everybody, most everybody's walked out through the shore break first sandbar, and then all the way out chest deep to second sandbar, and then swam out to third. Well, these sandbars are not complete lines. There's a break in them. Because as this water filters in and fills up, it's got to go back out, so it creates a break in the sandbar, and that's where that rip current occurs. And every year lives are lost. And so we brought education to the elementary and middle schools. I call it the Huckleberry Finn effect, because these kids want to adventure. They go out their first half hour, they're out there having fun. Their second half hour, they're out there adventuring, pushing the limits. And by the third half hour or an hour and a half into it, they're struggling for their lives many times. But getting back to the surfing aspects of it, the reason, there was a lot of reasons we stopped doing the Dairyland Surf Classic. And Wisconsin Board of Tourism and Sheboygan County Board of Tourism was very upset when we stopped. It was a huge event that brought people in from not only throughout the state, but the nation and internationally to this area. And we'd have paddling competitions. In the last 2 years, Lee and I developed this paddling competition, 11 years old and younger. And you paddle like from here to the front door and back again. Just paddle around that buoy and back again, and you run on shore, and these PVC posts say 1, 2, 3, 4, you know. Grab the first one if you're the first one in, you know. Now it was $5 for each kid to get in. The trophy cost us $750. The last year we gave away a $750 surfboard, the first place. Beach cruiser bicycle, custom-made wetsuits. Because we were sponsored by Corona, we could not have any Corona logos or anything out there. So our local surf shop, which helped us out for over 22 years of the Dairyland Surf Classic, sponsored all of this, whether it was t-shirts or bracelets or flip-flops or things. And these kids, we heard from the parents that these, and you know, some people aren't happy about there are no losers, everybody's gonna be first place sort of thing. But we went on that premise, and every kid that competed got a surf trophy. And the following year, the parents would say, you know, they cleaned off their Legos and their dolls off their dresser, and that now they got surf posters in their room, and everything revolves around that surf trophy that they got from Chicken Joe, you know. And now the parents are saying, it's not the county fair that's big anymore, it's a Dairyland Surf Classic. They have to have their beach cruiser bicycles and their skateboards, and they set up their blankets and put their surfboards in the sand. Mom, just drop me off with a cooler, I'll be fine with my friends. You know, it's a Dairyland. And so that was the biggest part of our event, and kept us doing it year after year. In the last 2 years, we made that one of our favorite events. And paddling is what surfing's all about. You paddle out as far as you can to catch the waves, and you paddle as hard as you can to catch that wave, to surf it in. And it's a clean, healthy lifestyle. And we were able to share it with some of these parents that didn't know anything about surfing. The kids locked into it. But Mom and
Can I ask you a question? Why did you give me this? Oh.
him back there. But he's picking me up. So, you know, there's many aspects of surfing that we're glad we're able to share with you this evening. Unless Lee's got anything else, anybody's got
I
any
could go
questions?
on and on. It's funny, just one quick thought. We were invited to go down to Madison to the Wisconsin Historical Society and give a presentation. And, you know, they said, all you have to do is talk for an hour. And the Board of Tourism had a nice PowerPoint program that was behind us and all that. And I said, I don't know if we can talk for an hour. Well, lo and behold, you know, like an hour and 20 minutes into it, they're going,
He didn't mention there was free beer.
well, there was. Yeah, it was very fun and interesting. And
One of the young ladies that won first place in this paddling competition, 11 years old and younger, we had heard through the grapevine that she was coming to this event. So along with the PowerPoint program that Sheboygan County Board of Tourism put together of these rare photographs and interviews we'd cut away and watch part of a movie for 5 minutes, or an interview that we did on, MSNBC Nightly News or something. We put her photo up there and said, Lexi Beecher is here. And she impressed us as a young lady.
She's sitting in the back of the room. She didn't know we were going to call her
Lexi,
up.
would you come up here? And we talked briefly about what Lexi Beecher meant to us, and how we need more strong women in surfing, and how she inspired other girls to surf. And we just wanted her to get a hand. And she was so She was just so excited. And surfing has given us so much, and it's our privilege to give back. So we never charge for any of it. If they charge you for this,
We get 50%,
there's money.
We're going out.
So it's the same thing. It's this aloha spirit and this ohana, this family, this giving, this sharing, this wonderful lifestyle. My son at age 10 was ranked 22nd in the United States. We surfed with Eastern Surfing Association throughout the Great Lakes, and I'd pull him out of school for a week because I was a professional competition surf judge on some of the biggest amateur surfing competitions in the world on the East Coast. And I was a single parent. And I was like the coolest dad in school because we had surfboards in the kitchen, and I'd pull him out of school for a week to go surfing on the East Coast. And it was cool when he'd come back and the principal would announce the competitions that he was in or what he placed, and it's fun being a kid and growing up. My daughter now is 13, and last year we were walking through waist-deep snow in February. It's about 17 degrees. We're going to push off some icebergs. And she looks at me and she goes, Dad, none of the other parents do stuff like this with their kids. Really? She says, are we crazy, Dad? I said, oh yeah, we're crazy, but we're surfers. We're supposed to be crazy. And surfers are always, there's a moniker along with surfing. And when I promote surfing with different entities that know nothing about it, I tell them, take a look at advertising from Wall Street Journal and Chevy and Ford and Apple, or anytime you want to grab anybody's attention, they're surfing in there. It's this free and easy lifestyle.
Viagra, I saw one with a surfboard.
It'll make you stand up. And, wow, is it getting hot in here?
Oh, it's getting warm.
But when you're surfing a wave, you paddle as hard as you can and get up as fast as you can before you hit the bottom. And you do a hard turn. And as you're turning, you're looking behind you and in front of you to see what that living life form is going to do. That undulating, living, breathing, growing life form. You can never surf the same wave twice. No two waves are the same. And as you're surfing that, you're looking close behind you to see what your board is doing and what the wave is doing, but you're looking close in front of you. How far to the nose are you? What's the wave doing? And you're looking far down the line at what that wave is doing and far back behind you in case you could turn and make a better wave that way. But you're watching for structures and people and wave. So what happens is, as you're surfing and as you're going on this fluid journey, this unipivotal dance at this creature called a wave, everything is lost. Bills are lost. Jobs are lost. Aches and pains go away. Problems with relationships. Everything is lost because your mind that you only use 10% of, you've now opened up endlessly to free flow with this entity, to work with it, not against it, to get the ride of your life. And I've had rides, getting goosebumps talking about it. When you finally make it to shore, I put my hand on my chest to feel how hard my heart was pumping through my wetsuit. And I thought, I'm just going to stand here just for a few minutes to just think about that ride I just took. And then you look up and see there's better waves out there, and I might just get a better wave. And you just don't take the time to wait. You get out there as fast as you can, and you're living the dream. Thousands of miles away from any ocean, you're doing something that most people will never get to do. You're calling yourself a surfer, and you're living this free and easy lifestyle on one of the best beaches in the world here in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So unless there's any questions, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question because I can remember going to live in Sheboygan Falls, go to the lake, and actually my parents saw us with that undertow. Because you walk out there, it's then all of a sudden you'll drop to 4 feet, and they also actually, we had to have a life preserver that you could go up the stands. So that way you with your life preserver, if you did get caught, you could at least have a better chance.
We did our first rescue when we were 14 years old.
Okay.
I'm telling a story.
All right, go ahead.
We're walking along this time of the year along by Oppenberg's Iron Works.
It was right around Thanksgiving.
Water was tremendously cold, little or no waves, and we see a deer out there, so, you know, kids, we're taking rocks and we're trying to hit that deer, you know, and we're trying as hard as we can to hit that deer, and Rocky Grove, the oldest of the 5 surfers that were with us, started screaming and yelling, and we're all wondering why. And the old lady rolled over and looked at us.
There was a woman in a fur coat out this deep in the water.
Due to Parkinson's disease, she had wandered out into the lake, fallen over, and drifted out.
I threw off my jacket, and I knew somebody else was throwing off theirs, Jeff Schultz. And I got out to her first, and I'm in water this deep in, like the 3rd week in
I
November.
yelled at these guys right away, go get her, I'll call the police, because I'm thinking, I'm not handling
not
a
going
dead
out
body.
I tried to lift her up. She had this fake fur coat on, and she must have weighed 250 pounds with this coat on. And I got her head up to my shoulder, and then Jeff Schultz, who was a little taller, got on the other side, and we brought her in backwards so we could keep her head above water. And we slid her up on shore, and she's still breathing, but she's blue. I don't know why.
And she was really wrinkly, but we didn't know if she was supposed to be wrinkly or not. But we stripped her jacket
So
off and
actually, that
covered
was the
her.
first time we saved somebody. And
And so we got gubernatorial and mayoral awards. The VFW had a dinner for us, and we got citations with medals and photographs on the front page of the Sheboygan Press for saving this woman's life. And it was kind of a joke among us who were there, who were involved, that we actually got all those medals and all those citations for being really shitty shots.
Okay, I got another question too. Now with this currents and everything that Sheboygan, is that why you surf here? Why couldn't you go more further south or further north?
Well, part of it is, especially the #1 hotspot for freshwater surfing in the Sheboygan area is a bend in North Pier. And because North Pier, I've flown over and photographed for articles that I had done for surfing magazines, there's a big bay from North Point to North Pier, and then there's a bend in the pier. That, anytime there's waves, that bay fills up with water, and it exhausts, and where it exhausts is right at the bend in that pier. So as the waves are coming in, they hit that tremendous current going out, and that jumps up. Now surfers can read waves like you may read a book. We could say why it's better over there, why it's better over there, but we can actually see little waves going out that you'll say, look at that undertow. Or you'll see a peak of sand on the beach where 2 currents will come together and create that point. Now, when you really wanted to see it bad was 2 years ago when Sandy left New Jersey and came straight west to Lake Superior and followed the full length of Lake Michigan and produced record 33-foot waves on Lake Michigan. Now that's an open water swell. So every 9 seconds you're getting this tremendous wall of water. And everyone, police, fire, mayor's commission, water safety, everybody told everyone, don't go to the beach. And they could have had a traffic cop down there. There were people everywhere. And the police were stationed on our piers because teenagers kept trying to go out to see how far they could go. You know, what happens if you fail there? Well, that morning I got a call from Johnny B. from one of the nation's biggest FM radio stations, The Loop, out of Chicago. And I've done many interviews on his radio station. And he called me at 4 a.m. and said, would you be available for a 7 o'clock interview? I said, sure. 7 a.m. he called, so he says, okay, Larry, you're the big kahuna on the Great Lakes. What's going to happen, you know, today? I said, they're going to close Lakeshore Drive. It's going to be inundated with more than 4 feet of water. He said, no, it's not. Well, it was. And I said, the biggest swell is coming down your way. He says, okay, you're the big kahuna. You're coming to Chicago. Where are you going to surf? I went, I'm almost 60 years old. I says, how can I put this? The old guys don't sled ride the big hills anymore. He says, I like that. So I said, no, it's going to be so out of control, and people have seen how far a boat wake can go across the lake, miles and miles and miles. Any structure that these waves bounce off, you know, it's easy to imagine a 12-foot wave traveling 15 miles to crash into another wave. So it was just so out of control, it wasn't surfable, but there were plenty surfers out there. And if I would have been 10 years younger, it would have been me. But we only go out on the perfect days now when it's waist high, and we always warn people on the beach in many of these structures, don't go out there, don't do that. So unless there's anything else?
What's the correlation between your type of surfing and the windsurfers out there now?
Are you talking windsurfers or kiteboarders?
Well, the kiteboarders, windsurfers.
The kiteboarders, the boards are probably, I mean, that board right there is 7'4". A kiteboarder is going to use a board half that size. And the kiteboarders have a harness with a ripcord. The kiteboarders, you know, if they start to get into trouble, they pull a ripcord and the kite just drops down.
They're sitting in a harness, and they've got a stick for turning their kite. And basically, they've got their feet in straps for the board, and they just plane anyway. And so they can go 10 miles out. And the further you go out, the bigger the waves. I mean, we envy these guys, but I don't envy their knees. You know, give me 5 minutes on one of the boards doing this, I wouldn't be able to handle that.
Well, I'm just curious if when I go down and watch the storms down there, I see a lot more kiteboarders out there now than surfers. And that's kind of where I was leading.
You know,
with
it's
this.
probably 50-50 now, surfers versus kiteboarders.
Well, with the kiteboarders, what are happening is there's a huge population throughout Wisconsin that goes on any body of water that they can, Winnebago being one of their favorites, but you get that small chop. Now, as soon as they know that there's big rollers, everybody comes from all over. And we've got these unique structures of these, you know, half-mile long piers and rocky outcroppings and reefs and that these guys go out to investigate or use these as launch jumps. And they'll head up in the air, and right before they hit the water, they'll turn their chute so they just gently float back down. We see guys jumping over our piers all the time, so they'll head for the piers and change the direction of their chute. That'll give them more lift. What people don't realize about these kites is that the entire edge is inflated. So if it touches the water, it won't sink. They can draw it back up, it'll come up. And I was watching an instructor at High Avenue teaching a new guy. Sits down in the water, has the board sideways, has the kite in the neutral position where it's not pulling or doing anything. And when you bring it down, it pulls you up. And it pulled that poor sorry soul up. He went over the top of his board, face plant into the water, and for 3 blocks, that guy chased that guy face down as the kite. I'm thinking, put the kite back up. I'm thinking he's eventually going to run into Blue Harbor, he'll stop, he'll be fine. But I'm going, hey, $45 an hour to have somebody show him how to drown. I could do that. I'd do that for half price. But it's always interesting to see, you know, being in the sport this long, almost 48 years, that how much things change, how much technology has changed. We can stretch a wetsuit arm probably 6 feet. It's so super light and flexible. The surfboards that weighed 25 pounds now weigh 8. We used to ride 10-foot boards. Now they ride 6-foot boards that weigh 3 pounds. We have these surfers that are world-class surfers from Australia that surf here and live here. And movie makers are coming here to tell more people, because as the popularity of good health blossoms, surfing is a big part of that, and to do it in fresh water more and more. So 4 weeks ago, Shape magazine flew in from New York and met me so I could take them out surfing. There was no surf, and so we went to North Point and did the interview there. Me in Shape magazine. Round is a shape. You know, I'm a photographer. I'm not big into Photoshop, but I'm hoping they are.
I have a son that's 23. He got addicted to that when he was 12. And it's just been such a positive experience in many ways. But one thing that my wife and I notice is the culture and the friends on and off the water, whether there's a wave or not, or just when there's a chance of waves and the cars start showing up and people are tweeting and texting. Is it at the elbow? Is it at here or there? And he's got all the lingo down. And it's a group of friends now that's bled over to, he now lives in Milwaukee and goes surfing with the group down there. And it's
Well, it's exciting.
Oh, you know, and I remember Davis and the whole young crew. Yeah, they're texting and stuff like that, but they'd rather be out in the water. And that's what's cool about it. You know, I see kids walking down the street like this all day long. That whole clan that started, oh, sorry, I got it. No, I don't have to. But that whole clan of young guys that started it, it's cool for Larry and I if we played a small part in getting somebody younger out in the water.
I've told Davis and
And they are
Steen
so
and
connected.
Alex and all of those guys, when we grew up, we had our local heroes, the Andy Summersburgers, Randy Grimmers, and Tommy Zieglers and things, that we looked up to these guys because they not only, you know, had it all down, but they could surf. But then we got the magazines and started reading about the legends of surfing and what they were doing, the nose rides or the big waves. And then they became our heroes. And now that we're older, the kids are our heroes. We see them playing in the water like we did, you know, tackling one another, splashing one another, or dodging one another, and
Spending 5 hours until they couldn't move their arms anymore. Yeah.
And
we
the
did
cool
that.
thing about being in our positions is we've been in enough movies or interviews or Dairyland Surf Classic that we're probably the best known figures for surfing on the Great Lakes. And these young kids come up, and just like when Andy Summersburger waved at me the first time, you'll call this kid over and say, "Hey, I saw you out there. You're just getting started. You're doing really good." And they're like, "He talked to me." You know, and to be able to do that to a young person, I do it because I remember that simple one wave that Andy Summersburger gave me. He waved at me first. I call these kids over and, "What's your name? Where are you from? How long you been? Boy, you're really good. I saw what you did. Did you do that on purpose?" You know, and so it's neat to be able to do that, to be in that position to share, you know, what we have or what was given to us by the lakes. So, I guess that's it. We thank you for coming, and if you did pay for any of this, just make sure that we get half. No.